Back at the hub.
Back in studio. Welcome aboard. So today is September 21st, 2020, and this is the Crushing Iron Podcast. Back in studio again, episode 410.
Is it really?
Well, last week I made that Beach Boys reference of She's Real Fine, my 409.
Oh, that's right.
And that's the only reason I was able to remember what podcast it was. But yeah, we were back in studio after doing a one-day, 3-podcast deal before you and I both took a week off, and then we were both traveling. You went to Madison, I went to Houston. We had a little C26 tour in Indianapolis, Madison, Houston, getting together our athletes in those areas, and we were gone. And I recorded here via Skype, so our last week's podcast were much more in line with the previous 390-ish that we had done, but we are back, hopefully crystal clear on a Monday morning. I have to say, beautiful Monday morning here in Chattanooga. It is beautiful. There is not a cloud in the sky. Oh. It is crisp. I'm in a hoodie. That's my perfect. If I had to be a temperature, I'd be this.
Yeah, this is. Isn't this what they call like San Diego weather?
Dude, you took the words right out of my mouth, man. If you can wear that's it, man. If you could pick a temperature to be in year round, this would be it, because you can rock a hoodie and shorts and be fine, or you can wear, jeans and a t-shirt and be fine, like we are right now. We are covering the yin and the yang of this temperature that is perfection.
And barefoot.
Barefoot. This is the life. This is my perfect. I love this time of year. I love the weather. Everybody wants to be outside. And just the energy around town the last week has been pretty fun in terms of, it's been obviously a hard year, people being isolated inside for most of the year, and now people kind of get out, and I think it was easy with cold weather, and then, winter, and then you had the blazing summer heat. People were kind of like, you know what, I'm fine to kind of just like not be outside in 110-degree heat. And now football's back. You got the weather's great. People are loving running and being outside. The leaves are going to start changing soon. And you know what? I'm optimistic that we're going to negative split this year and have a very solid into what has been a very difficult and challenging, yet I think also rewarding 2020.
You're coming out with positivity, man.
I always come with positivity.
No, I know, but you're coming right out of the gate. I got back Saturday. I walked Maddie yesterday around 11 in the morning. Perfect. Downtown. It was hopping.
Yeah, telling you, man.
I walked around downtown. I mean, like everything was packed, and there was art shows going on. I'm like, what happened? I think you're right. The weather was just getting too oppressive, man. It has turned over. It is beautiful, and what's also beautiful is you, our listeners, giving us. He wasn't looking at me. I kind of looked over.
At you. I'm like, no, sorry, man. I mean, you look great today, but no. If it's your first time tuning in, we do appreciate you giving us your time. We know you have a lot of options in the triathlon podcast universe and just podcasts in general, and your time is valuable, and you giving us an hour of your day means a lot. So if it's your first time tuning in, again, appreciate it. We have over 400 podcasts in our backlog. They're outlined. Mike does a really awesome job of kind of specifically outlining the topics that we go over. We don't have a lot of guests on. We do cover all things swim, bike, run, and life. We'll occasionally do race recaps, race previews. We'll talk about, things our athletes are going through. Oftentimes we'll hop into our closed group, which is on Facebook. You can search that. It's Crushing Iron Group. Answer a quick question, and we will let you in. Sometimes we'll use that conversation there to kind of drive the topics of our podcast. But for the most part, Mike and I, as best friends, but also as coaches and athletes, we just try to do our best.
Years.
Yeah, we're coming up on a 10-year anniversary in 3 years. That's what triathletes do. Like, you fast forward. Like, we've basically been friends for 10 years.
Has it been 10?
Yeah, we basically
Because you keep
10.
kind of say I've been in the sport 7.
I'm giving you your red shirt year. I mean, like we talked about last podcast.
This is definitely a red shirt.
I'm giving you a red shirt. I've been in sport, unfortunately, for like 20 years. It makes me feel old, but that's what we do. We do have an agenda, and that's to keep you happy and healthy. We have no sponsors. We have no ads. We won't shove anything like that down your throat, or really the things that we believe in. We really want, and we talked about, Mike and I talked about this last night over dinner, was we really do want the podcast to be just a vessel for you to come. We're not going to shove, politics and things that are so polarizing down your throat. Then it seems like that's what everyone wants to do these days. But just deliver our message and our experiences that we've had in the sport and what we're going through still personally, within the sport, trying to grow, not just as athletes, but as people. And that's what we try to do, and deliver it in a consumable, digestible way so you can take it and make it your own. It's your journey. It's not ours. And we've been doing it for a while, and hopefully you can. We've also made plenty of mistakes. We're not experts. We are not professionals by any stretch of the imagination, but we've been through a lot and we've seen a lot in our years combined as both coaches and athletes. So that's what we do. We'll share that experience, and hopefully today you can take something positive away from our podcast and apply it to not just your triathlon life, but your day-to-day life as well.
Yeah. I listen to a lot of podcasts, and we were also talking about this last night. And I think the reason I really still enjoy doing these podcasts, which has been, we've gone over that before, but this is easily our longest committed exercise between the two of us in our history of our lives.
outside of sobriety for me, this is the most consistent thing I've ever done in my entire life besides breathing.
And we really enjoy it because it's sort of an exploration. It's not a, here are 10 commandments of something. And I think a lot of times, like when I'm listening to podcasts, I'm just getting that sense now that everybody's got the answer for everything. And I just don't think it's that clean, man. And that's why I love how we kind of go about it and explore it and talk about it. Now you said, and when you just for an example, we had sort of a little bit of topic in mind, but when you said, yeah, man, I've been in the sport 20 years, and I got to thinking, wow, has any philosophy of yours changed since that first day?
Yeah, man, that's actually a really great question. When I originally got into the sport, I got into it. So it hasn't been quite 20, but it's been 18, a little over 18 years since I started training for my very first triathlon, which was Memphis in May, a long, very, very, very long time ago. And then the next year I did a very old and only lasted a year race series called Tri-101 in Bradenton, Florida, which is actually a very interesting distance. It was a 1.8 mile swim, an 80 mile bike, and an 18 mile run, which I think is actually a pretty awesome distance. Actually, used to be very, very popular. But anyway, so that's how I got into the sport. I originally got into the sport to lose weight, and then found myself just loving it. Having grown up swimming year round, I just kind of gravitated to the sport, even though I was super out of shape when I started. And then started just really diving in. I loved and I still do, the complexity of it. And you were talking there a minute ago about how, we just cover a lot of the in-between. Like we cover the gray, and this sport is super gray. Like there is not like a set thing for everyone. There are obviously general principles and things you should, at least adhere to for the most part, but then make it your own. And man, over the years, I go back and forth on a lot. And I think that's one of the most difficult things about coaching is you never want to stay complacent and only believing what you believe, because then you're done learning. A lot of people are like that. There is only one way to do things. And everything else is wrong. And then you get distracted, or at least not consumed isn't the right word. You get, distracted. I think when new things come out, or you see other people and other coaches come out with different things and that are, trying to popularize different training methods. And then you look back and you think that, well, if you look back over the last 100 years, 150 years in endurance sports, like what are the main guiding principles that have primarily been the most successful, places that you really want to go for how endurance athletes, perform, and that's the crazy thing about endurance sports in general is they are all very much the same, right? If you look at I was telling you last night, like we have two athletes specifically this week that are, one of them's doing a 100-mile run race and the other one's trying to swim the English Channel. As I was developing their training plan, like, is it different from, obviously like a traditional triathlon training program? Absolutely. But it's more, it's still like you take that 80-20 approach like we were talking about again last night, is like 80% of it's still the same. It's all about building a specific basis, just how it's just the parts are different in what you do. And so I don't think it's changed as much. I think I originally started out with, a minimalist view, which I still am in a lot of ways. But it's fluctuated. I don't say I've gotten distracted, but I think you have to explore as a coach. And a lot of times I use myself as kind of like my own guinea pig to transfer to athletes, like what I think works, even though I'm obviously different from other people. But it's not rocket science, and people try to make it, I think, too much rocket science, and things look exciting. But it's funny because if you look at things that are exciting and to other people, it's always the shortcut. It's always the 5 quickest ways, or you can, like the books, like you can get faster on 3 days a week of running. Well, that's, great. Good luck with that. And I hope that works out for you. But for 99% of the people, that's not the case.
Maybe short term, I think, is the whole problem with that.
It's short term.
Something may work.
Yep. And it's just hard it's hard to develop it. And, then you kind of have 80% of, and I tell our athletes this, and I think I even talked about it on a podcast, whereas, 80% of what we do is based on science. It's based on my experience as well with athletes, but also like the hundreds of years of science that basically backs up like how you should traditionally periodize and focus on training, and how just a person's physiology adapts to stimulus. And then 15% of it is really based on the athlete themselves, how much time they have available, what kind of responder are they? They respond better to high intensity or low intensity, or are they somewhere in between? But then if they are in between, how do you, if they're a higher volume responder yet only have 8 or 9 hours a week, well, you can't really have the same answer for that, right? Because like if you're, let's say, take you for example, if you're a guy that I've over time figured out that, well, Mike is definitely a high volume responder. He needs 15, 16, 17, 18 hours a week to really, really respond well to get him to a point to where he can be very, very successful. But Mike tells me, hey, dude, I'm super busy. I really only have 8 to 10, max 11 hours a week to train. Mm-hmm. Okay, well, then you're kind of stuck. You're not stuck, but then that's when you kind of have to get creative and think, all right, well, I know what he's best at. And that's also the fun of coaching, is that you take the athletes, that's a 15% of it. And then the other 5% of it is you get to kind of do your own shit. You get to make stuff up. You have to be creative with that. And you can't just, cookie cutter everything to a specific thing and not have this fear of like playing around and feel you're going to fail. Like one of the things that I've always, not always, but I think one of the biggest experiments that I have taken on and found huge value in with athletes is double ride weekends and split running and moving long runs to Wednesdays, and depending on the athlete and the course and their ability is loading up weekends with cycling. And athletes, have different responses to that, but you have to be flexible in that. And again, like you need to stay up on the research and what's going on in the world of endurance sports and science. But for the most part, they just come out with things that reiterate what's been going on for the last 100 years, or they either totally cast doubt on something that's new, or they, because what happens is something new and exciting comes along. Like, there, like 2 or 3 years ago, the big rage for probably the average person listening to the podcast, but there was a big rage on race pace only swimming. So I think it was called like USRPT swimming, but it was basically where you just got in and you swam as hard as you could for a very small amount of time. And there was this one very high level swimmer that did this one thing. Mm-hmm. And the ESPN Sports Center did a thing about it. He only did and he qualified for this, ended up, it's basically non-existent anymore. He's basically like gone by the wayside. And there was this huge rage about, oh, well, this is the way to do it. You just get in, you swim as hard as you can for a very short period of time. This is how, and then, years go by and they do more research on it. They really take time to dig in the nuts and bolts of how or why this would work. And then usually they just end up debunking it, because someone will come out with something super exciting and it looks like, oh, that could work. Yep. But it takes time to really dig in and actually either prove or disprove that it actually works. And in the meantime, what happens is and that's why triathlon and coaching and self-coaching is so difficult, is that, well, it might take a year and a half, 2 years to really prove or disprove something. Well, in the meantime, you've given athletes a year or 2 years of doing something that's likely wasteful, right? And because it's been exciting, and you look back and think, oh, well, that's not really how it works. And I'm not going to get into keto and like all the research that's coming out now about performance and athletes and where they're going with that. But primarily like the research that's coming out now is saying that, it's actually inhibits performance on a lot of levels for most athletes. But it's still very popular, and so there's just a lot to dig through, and you kind of have to, again, like, you kind of have to hang out in the gray, understand what you're trying to accomplish with your athletes and what's reasonable for them. But that's why I love triathlon. It's literally you're never done. There's always something new out there, and you either have to prove it or disprove it and then apply it, or maybe even say, you know what, I like that. I just don't like all of it. So I think I'll take a little piece of it with me and then see if this works.
I like what you said about like how a lot of the new stuff is really kind of just something that was around before that's just repackaged. And I think that's sort of a thing. And in general with our lives today, it's sort of always this, people, like let's just take because I've always, or for a long time now, I've liked that butter coffee thing, but that is nothing new. that's from monks in I don't know, I think in India or something, that used to drink yak butter with tea, for example. So it's something that's been around, that's just been kind of repackaged and all this sort of thing. And now you get all these, what's the latest one? And I've been investigating as I get older, is this collagen thing, because that's now the next buzzword, it feels like, is collagen. And now I also hear that that's been in Jell-O. I mean, it's a Jell-O.
Yeah.
Product. We used to eat a lot of Jell-O growing up, and it wasn't the greatest for you because it was always, filled with sugar maybe or whatever. But it was like, oh, okay, so we're kind of always doing that sort of thing. And when I think of training and even coaching and looking at what we do, sort of my general philosophy is like, okay, you just sort of said it. It's sort of, you see all this stuff now. How can we just simplify that again? And how can you simplify that again? Because as a filmmaker and a video guy for years, and kind of a hacky writer, all my things is everything I've learned about that is like, how do you break that down and simplify it? Because when you simplify it, I always say that simplification is very rarely simple, but when you can simplify it in such a way, it becomes more powerful because it's more influential in many ways. But as an athlete, if you have simplicity groomed into your workouts and your philosophies, you don't kind of go running off chasing, the shiny objects and things like that. And if you can break down what's going on, and that's why, if you talk about the 80-20 rule, I would imagine 80% of the people listening to this podcast are kind of in it for getting into shape and being better and maybe finishing races, whereas 20% want to, go after it a little bit and get faster and qualify and do all these sorts of things. I think everybody wants to get faster, but generally, I think that the majority of the people like to keep it relatively simple and of course entertaining or enjoyable. And I think that, by the way, that's one of the things you do really well is, you have this knack of sort of dropping in a workout that just like hits the spot, and it may be a few times a week or whatever. And you're kind of looking at your next day going, oh, that's exactly what I needed today. And I don't know how you do that, but that's a whole another Zoom call or something. But but that's what I say. So as I train, if I'm especially if I'm not in a mode for something, or towards the end of it, training for a big race or something, I'm just looking for opportunities to feel good. And I look for, little section. And that's why I say when I'm riding, one of the things I just always do is I just kind of go after hills on the uphill. And I don't know how you quantify that or break that down into intervals or any of that sort of things. But if you're just used to working hard up a hill and then kind of coming back, whatever. For me, simplicity is a huge part of this thing. Same with running. I like to run up hills, and we talked about that a lot where, you take the long way home or you take the weird way home and you hit one more hill or whatever. And those things just sort of accumulate on top of each other and pay off. And it's not always about, the scientific breakdowns. I mean, when you're an elite athlete, I'll surrender that. I mean, when people get to elite levels, but they're also, as we talked about last night, I think they're eating perfectly. They're nailing down everything in nutrition and rest and massage and PT and all that stuff is coming with it. So there's that pointy end where people are really going for it, but most of us are just trying to get better and feel good.
Well, if you look, there's a lot of things that there are like, and when you talk about professional athletes, and that's why you can look at what they do and how they've done it and try and replicate that and think, well, the pros do this or they don't do that. The biggest thing pros have going for them is that they've been doing this for a long time. Like you look at Ferdinand, who is arguably the best long course triathlete or probably the best overall triathlete on the planet, after competing and winning gold in the Olympics and 70.3 champion and Ironman. He was a top level world-class triathlete long before he took up Ironman. And so not only do pros have that going for them in terms of how long they've been in the sport and how they've developed along the way, but it's also the consistent nature of years and years. And then you compile that with the ability that they train, a lot of them train 20 to 35 hours a week.
Yeah.
Right.
And how do you
on
sustain
top
that?
of the fact they've been doing it for years and years and years and years. So like, yeah, it's in a totally different thing. Yeah. So they're great athletes, sure. But it's so much time. Again, there's a lot of athletes that if they, I would argue and say that if any athlete could quit their job and be fully self-supported by someone else or, a country or a governing body for an entire year and give up everything and be perfectly fed and perfectly trained and, have unlimited training hours to do, then they would see an insane difference in their result, right? So, but age groupers are a totally different animal. And, like professional athletes have some of the same stressors, but not a lot of them, some of them do, but not a lot, and I think that's probably the biggest, when you ask it, the biggest change in coaching for me was, what I was focused on primarily as coaching when I got started in it and up until I ended up going to treatment and getting sober in 2012 was, performance, a lot of data, really looking into the science and reading things, about how things would go and trying to really drive a high level performing athlete to do very, very, very well. And then after I got sober and went through a very, very obviously like holistic, experience of like diving into some of the harder things in life, which are the emotional and mental aspects of just the day-to-day things that we go through as people. Not only was it helpful and very insightful for me as an individual and as an athlete myself to gauge that for me, as an athlete training to perform, but also just made me incredibly comfortable talking about that and listening to athletes and asking tough questions because, how are you really doing? And putting myself out there in a vulnerable way that hopefully allows the athletes to open up to me. I would say for a lot of athletes, I'm the first person to know something, before their spouse, or before anybody else. Like if there's something going on, or, they'll confide in a coach and, or myself, or they'll tell things that they don't want to tell anybody else. Like that's what really allows you to kind of really figure out how an athlete's wired, but not just how they're wired, how they're currently running. Because every day you wake up, you're not the same car, you're not the same engine. You generally have it, but there are certain things affecting it, and you can't just run it. Like we always use a chassis and an engine as an analogy for training. A lot of athletes want to build the engine. That's all they want to do. They want to go fast, but they never fully develop the chassis. So their engine ends up breaking their chassis, which would be, getting injured, overrun or ride too much or swim, whatever, like you end up breaking yourself. But for athletes, like for sticking with the car now, it's like you never wake up the same car. You might be working on the engine, you might be working on the chassis, but one day you may wake up and your gas tank is low. You may be low in energy. One day you may wake up and your rear tire is low, so you might have a niggle or something that's like hampering. You might be really tight. So you're all, or life might be stressing you down, and you're just exhausted. So those are the things you just have to look for as a coach, and that's like if you're. I think a lot of people. Every year, a lot of people, look to become coaches in all kinds of sports. And I think that's great. I think the world needs more coaches. The world certainly needs more coaches who care about their athletes. That, while certifications and things are wonderful, and I think they're very, very beneficial, is that, if you really also focus on your own ability to be vulnerable and ask very difficult questions and have conversations with your athletes, because that, like the mind and the heart to me are the key to performance, right? Like you can train well and you can have a perfectly laid training plan laid out in front of you, which most people do. It's Monday. You're going to listen to this podcast. You're going to look at your week. It's perfectly planned out. Things are great. Yeah. The sun is shining. The world, things are looking up, man. Things are great. And then you get to the office and around 1 o'clock you get an email and it's like, here we go again. My day's ruined. Oh, it's Monday. Here goes the week. And I've got this to do. I got to fly here and do this. Like, I have athletes, people are now traveling a lot more. People who have been home for the last few months are now opening back up and traveling for work. And it's like your life gets crazy and all of a sudden it gets out of whack. And that what stresses more, and you're selling your house. You're like, those are things you have to be able to adapt to. And you can't just look at it and think, okay, well, how can I make this work? It's a lot like cooking. It's like, you might do this, you might need a little bit more salt or a little bit of less salt, or, it might need a little more cooking or less cooking. It might need to rest longer. It might need, you might need to adjust the size. Like there are just so many things you have to look and pay attention to that, is training complex? No, it's not. I'll be honest with you. And there it is. Training is, and that's, I probably contradictory to what most athletes or most coaches probably want, but, training isn't it's not some rocket science thing that people are special that have this like thing going for them. It's like, you just have to pay attention. You can't just pay attention to a 40-minute run and a 2-hour bike and a 300 meter swim, because there's so many other things that go on. You have to pay attention to their lives and how they're feeling. And if they're not telling you how they feel, you have to kind of prod them. And if they don't want to tell you, they don't want to tell you. But the human person is the most complex. Like what they're going through with life and stress and emotions, that is the most complex thing. And if you can't help figure that out or adapt the training to that complexity, then it becomes even more complex, because then you have like, two rams fighting each other for one common goal, and it's just not going to work out. It's going to end up in a stalemate. And that's the most difficult part, is working with the person, not just the plan. And you have to, mix those two together, the person and the plan you want, and then realize that for the most part, the plan doesn't dictate squat. The person dictates it. Like take yourself, for example. Let's say you and I had mapped out your perfect year this year, and last, October or whatever, after you took a month off from, Ironman Wisconsin, and then you're like, all right, here we go. Like, I want to plan for next year. Let's map out like the season. And then you look at what's transpired over the course of the last year for you. You traveled to Wisconsin a lot. You lost your father. You sold your house. You moved to a new city, all in the middle of a pandemic. Yeah, those plans we made, yeah, they mean zero. Like they absolutely mean nothing. Plus, you've been dealing with plantar fasciitis. Like they mean zero, right? And like, so the plan would have been easy to see and like, oh, that looks exciting. I can do that. Well, then obviously life takes control in life. I mean, because life owns it. And if you can't adapt and understand and be flexible in that, and also just like, and as an athlete, especially if you're an athlete that self-coaches, like not get so wrapped up in how rigid you feel like you have to be with every single training session that has to be met with perfection and exactness and acuteness. Like this has to be done perfectly, or I'm not going to get the response. And come race day, I'm going to look back and I'm gonna like, coach is going to say, well, Mike, if you back on that Monday, September 21st, you remember when you went just a little too hard in that zone 3 workout going up that hill?
Yeah, that was bad.
That was bad, man. And it really screwed up your day. And I can't believe it doesn't work like that. Like it just doesn't work like that. And that's why you have to be flexible, and you have to ask questions. You have to pay attention. And it's hard to read people through text and training, because it's very much like a relationship. You just kind of know, like if you're in a relationship and you say, hey, how's it going? Fine. You're like, oh, it's great. This is not going to be good. I got to ask another question, then you're afraid to ask a question because usually you messed up. But that's what it is.
You just say, okay.
Okay, see you later. And then 5 hours later, it's like, oh, well, you know what? I wasn't fine. And then you're like, oh, great, here we go. So that's it. Is like, it's very, very, very much a relationship. And as we all know, relationships are super hard. Right. And that's why training in triathlon is that's the most complex. It's the person. It's not the plan.
I got to tell you, I was really getting into your analogy there, the car. You go into the car analogy a lot. And I thought, I love it. The deeper you went there, the even more intriguing it was. Normally the engine, the chassis, but then you got into the tires. And I started thinking about the oil and how we, sometimes we run hot, sometimes we run cold. What does that mean? How do we take care of that? And, and if there's a limit on the oil you put in, and there for a reason you could keep putting more in, but they only want so much. And, more isn't always better when it comes to whatever nutrition or whatever you're thinking about. But the idea of maybe some days we are hot or it's cold. And I mean, these are things that, as someone who is tries to have always been very in tune with my body, I notice these things. And it's a weird deal sometimes when you're like, okay, I feel cold this morning, for example. Today wasn't one of those days because it was beautiful. But you know how you have that feeling like you're like a little, kind of crusty or something, and like
I don't ever wake up crusty.
When you wake up crusty. But then you make that decision. Is like, do you plow through it, or do you kind of just let it sort of evolve? And I think probably letting it evolve is usually the right answer. That's my big thing with everything, is being warmed up and ready to go. And because I always use that if you crank the engine and just start flooring it, and your car's not in the position to handle a cooling situation, then I think that's the body too, right? Like, that's why I always say, it's like, it's going to be hot out there or whatever on this race, and make sure you start out super slow so you can get your cooling system of your body working well and right on time, because the hotter it gets, the better it can perform then. But if you overheat from the get-go, you're screwed. Then you can't come back. And that's the car analogy too, right? It's once it's gone, then you got to pull over inside of the road and wait for a wrecker and like have.
When in doubt, take it for a test drive around the block.
Yeah.
Don't let it just sit in the garage. Unless it's like you can't even start it. Obviously, then you got problems and you got to go to the doctor, do something. But the best thing you can do, and that's training too, is just take it for a test spin around the block. Like if you're feeling off or you're feeling like, still get out there and go. Don't go off and go for a 10-hour road trip on the interstate, with your, leaving your credit card at home and see how far you can get, see what your car can do. Because then, like you said, you'll end up on the side of the road having a really, really bad day. Take it for a test drive. See, what happens, or does the engine get hot really quick, or does everything start to work, or not work? Oh, well, actually, maybe it was just, something was off, or it was something minor, like an air filter. Like, oh, and actually, we're good to go. Like, we can do this today. Mm-hmm. But I think that's also like one of the very difficult pieces of coaching and people, is that we have so many expectations, or not every athlete, but many athletes have so many expectations of every single run that they expect. They see one thing change, and then they expect a dramatic result to happen. And outside things don't matter. Like, they do matter, but they're not the only factor. Like a lot of athletes, this last weekend, there's not a huge cold front, but a lot of people were reintroduced to fall weather and what we call seasonal EPO. Like you went outside for your normal, run, and you're like, bam, like this is like, myself had in probably one of my best, strongest runs of the year yesterday, because it was, I've been running a lot this summer and like oppressive heat. And then all of a sudden I wake up and it's like 60 with no dew point humidity. It's like, live on a different planet. But then you also have it where you get out and run like the day before, and I was like, yeah, I felt okay. But you expect like, the weather changing, I'm going to be incredible. Right. Because and I think a lot of times we give too much credit to outside sources like the environment and to, the weather and dew point humidity, when, the main dictator is still that thing below your chin, which is your body. Like it truly decides how today is going to go. You can think it all you want, you can want it all you want, you can hope for it all you want. But ultimately, your body decides, not your brain. And that's something that I think people, we could all do a better job on really understanding and being sympathetic to, is understanding that like your body drives it. I know you can want it, and you can, want to accomplish it, and you can sign up for all these races. And like, I just think we forget how little in charge we are of so many things, in that our expectations and our goals and our wants and needs and hopes, however you want to layer those, like when it comes to like where the priorities are in life and what dictates things, those move to the back of the bus. Like you take life, you take your profession, you take personal life, relationships, you take, weather, you take just, how you're handling stress, and you're taking getting sick, getting injured. And then you take the fact that your body may or may not hold up different, to the certain volume that you want to take in. It's like everyone puts those last. They just feel like, oh, well, I've got this race and I got to go sub 12. Okay, have you really worked not the race math, but the life math on what's going to have to happen for you to get there? And that's what athletes never do. It's like, oh, well, that's I'm gonna sign up for Florida. Coach, I really, really want to go sub 12. It's never like, I think at like 11:27 is where I want to be. It's always like, I want to go sub 12. I'm like, oh, tell me how you got there. And like, oh, well, I'm definitely going to swim like, 105, 110, depending on the day. Okay, you have no idea what the weather's going to be like in a year. Or the water conditions. Oh, well, then I'm definitely going to bike. I generally cruise around 18.8, 18.9. That's kind of like my sweet spot. All right, sure, whatever. Mm-hmm. And then, the course is flat. It's probably going to be good weather. So, hey, I'm thinking about cruising probably a 4.5, 450, marathon. That should get me there. And again, I have no idea if that math adds up. I was just kind of shooting from the hip. But I'm like, all right, well, now that you've done the Tri-Calc expectation, I hope math, right? Of basically guessing what your body can do a year from now on a specific day with unknown conditions, let's work our way backwards to the training math and what you're going to have to more than likely accomplish to get there. So you're probably going to have to average 12 to 14 hours a week over this period of time. Okay, well, that's also going to have to give and take what your life is like. Are you going to be able to handle that? Do you travel? Do you have kids? Are you going to get sick? All things we can't predict. Right. So if we're going to average that, that means you're going to have some pretty big weeks, 16, 17, 18 hours a week to make sure that you're kind of banking hours to where you're probably more likely to have like 9 to 10. Are you going to get sick? Are you going to get hurt? How's your body going to adapt? Life. Oh yeah, that thing. Like, is there going to be a freaking pandemic that's going to shut life down for like 5 months? Are you going to get married? Or going to get divorced? Are you going to have a baby? Are your kids going to go virtual learning? That's the math that you can't do. And that's where people get so swept up in these expectations of races that are a year away that, listen, like, no one should ever, after this year, no one should ever think, I can plan out next year and how I'm going to perform, given what we've all been going through the last 6 months. Like, I think we've got a pretty hard lesson in how little control we have over so many expectations. Yes, you can still train, you can still be consistent, you can still get up and get better, and you can absolutely do that. But as I was telling an athlete earlier today via email, it's like, as if we've just seen, like, we can't even, people who are race goal oriented like yourself, we've just seen, like, we don't control races. Even those aren't guaranteed. The only thing you can guarantee is your effort, your execution, and your ability to get up and try to be as consistent as you possibly can every single day. Those are the only things you can control. And then you just do the best you can and then see where you end up on race day. But athletes don't like to look at that at the start to the finish, like, work their way backwards from the finish and the end result all the way back to the end.
Mm. It's funny. I feel like I can't even control those things sometimes. You know what I mean? Like, you're right, though. You control when you go to bed, when you get up, or to some limited capacity. But I do struggle with those sorts of things. And we're talking about, how you handle the day. Do you spin around the block and see how things are going? But I think a lot of that comes down to, your bedtime routine, your morning routine. We know this. This is not new philosophy. This is like, I don't know if, back in the day before they had lights and cell phones and everything like that, they just went to bed at night and woke up when it got light, And now I think that same monk, I was listening to this guy. I'll probably link the book in the that I just ordered in the show notes, but I don't know. It just sounded good. But he was talking about how one of the things that they did as a monk was they controlled the last thing they looked at and the first thing they looked at in the morning. And now what that is our phone for people. So it isn't, your partner or like a candle flame or any of these kind of things. It's usually like, let me just check the email one more time. I'll go to bed. And then whatever has come into your life without your control has just dictated your last thought. And then the first thing you see in the morning can really throw things for a loop. It can spin your day in a weird way because both those things have come at you from, the ether. And now it's like, maybe it's a good thing, maybe it's a bad thing, but how does that affect you and whatever. So it's just like, I like this idea, man. How do you react to no races? I have no idea. For me, it's been a weird one. I think honestly, and I've talked about this before, but not necessarily because I can't race it, but because the vibe isn't there. And I can't go watch races, or I can't like celebrate other victories from people and things of that nature. And I often think about that in terms of, we live in Chattanooga. I live fairly close to a quote unquote, hopping district or whatever. I don't really care to partake in it all that much. It's sort of when I live right downtown Nashville, I didn't go down there all that much, but it was kind of nice to know that it was going on, and I feel like that about races too. It's sort of like we've got some news because you know how it is, man. I'm trying to find things of interest, and of course football's sort of coming back, and we haven't talked about football that much, which is you guys should rejoice, but it's coming back in a way that's not really that intriguing, and I've kind of lost a little zest for it, and just the whole sporting environment in general has been kind of weird, so it's been hard. But that was usually sort of my escape or my go-to. Like, I was talking about, like, usually on a Saturday night, we're texting back and forth about, you come home and, you have a great day on a Saturday, and then you've got that game at night. It's not your team usually or whatever. It's a national game, and it's kind of fun, It's kind of fun to get lost in that. I haven't had that. So now, how are you filling those voids, or how are you filling those gaps? There's no races. There's no really, that's why I've been talking about, I've been watching these videos with monks, and I don't necessarily know that's like my jazz either, but I'm trying to find that thing.
You're searching for it, man. It's
searching for it.
I think, again, like, people like to give triathletes a lot of, crap sometimes, and rightfully so. I think that they can be very, very selfish creatures, by the way they train and how they race and whatever. And I get that. It's a very isolating, solo sport in general. It's not a team sport. But, like, it just how, like, much we actually in fact do. And like this week should be IRONMAN Chattanooga. Like, it's, the race course is like the bike course is like 1.5 miles from the hub, like part of the bike course, and the race expo and transitions like 2.5 miles from the hub. Like, this should be like a poppin' week with like thousands of athletes like coming in town, and like the energy and just like the celebration you get from other people, like seeing like come in and droves of like, man, like these people are doing it too. Like, and I think that's the part of isolation that we forget, is that sometimes we feel like we're the only, and that's because we feel like we're all special. Like we all have like these things that we're going through that nobody can understand and nobody's going through, and like nobody's this, and like it's just us, man. Like we're the only ones having this deal. Like, listen, shut up, you're not that special. Like, everyone's got shit they're going through. Like, we are all doing it in a different way. But when you see people out there racing, it's like, dude, this is like awesome. And I was on my run yesterday, and somebody was giving me crap in Houston when I was out running. They're like, man, you're so chatty when you run, or you're so happy today. And I'm like, well, I like to say hi when I run past people, because I think it's a nice thing to do. Like, I think people oftentimes get out and, I'm not expecting like hey, I'm like, hey, good morning.
When did that happen to you?
I don't know, man. It's kind of like, I don't have music, and I'll take my phone, which is also, people hate that. But, I just like to say, good morning. And, I was running back over the pedestrian bridge, and of course, I think it helped that I was having like a really great run. And this dude was like coming up, the only side of the pedestrian bridge that's actually hard, which is the side on the other side of the river, on the North Shore side, which is what you come up in Chattanooga 7.3. And he was coming. He was just, he was working it.
Yeah.
And I looked over at him, and I knew he couldn't respond. I knew he couldn't say anything, but I said, keep getting it after it, buddy. And he couldn't even barely breathe, so I knew he wasn't going to say anything in return. But it's just good, and I think that was part of what energized the rest of my run, was it's just good to, no matter what speed people are going, no matter what distance they're covering, no matter what, if they're walking fast or they're running fast, like, it's just that people are getting out and challenging themselves and not settling for where they were the previous day. And not to mention, like, they don't have to get better, but it's just good to see every other people out there like, you know what? He's probably got a crap ton of going on in his life too. He's probably super stressed. He's probably overwhelmed. He's probably nervous about doing this and, how work is going to be. And yet, there he is. Running up a hill, challenging himself on a Sunday morning where he could just be sitting on the back deck, eating pancakes and, being lazy and not getting up and playing video games. Yet there he is by himself, running up this hill, barely able to breathe. Dude. But that is what living is, right? That's like pushing and so it was so like that's why I love running downtown here in Chattanooga, because there's always people out. There's always people out, biking, running, walking, whatever. You can run over the pedestrian bridge, see people paddleboarding or swimming or like kayaking. It's like people just out being like, yeah, the world can be difficult, and guess what? It's always been difficult. It's just been a different kind of difficult, no matter how, what kind of world you're living in or how old you are. But people are still out there, like, doing it, and like, I don't want to say doing it. I mean, like, they're still out there finding a way to, in the middle of all this, like, do stuff. And yeah, life can be tough, but the people who aren't doing it just don't want you to do it either. And that's they'll verbalize that and post things like, no one's racing this year. You should just not play. Okay, well, you may have accepted that, and that might be the opt-out you want to make yourself feel comfortable for hanging it up and not doing it. But you know what? I'm not doing it. I'm not going out like that. I want to keep training. I want to keep focusing and doing me and challenging myself. And whether I race or not, I'm still going to have the focus that I just want to keep getting better. Like, you can say that and try to poo-poo, but I'm not riding that rainbow.
Now, you're right, man. I mean, this has been a weird year for me. I haven't felt like doing anything, but I have 100% been on the other side of that coin, wanting everything back. Back to what I just said, is like, I miss that energy and that vibe of things. And I almost feel, guilty sometimes. Like, let's, it's weird that we, because we called out, we thought Muncie was going to happen, 70.3, and we predicted it. And then it looked like it was really going to happen, and they pulled the rug out really late. And then we got some of that, see, told you, knew it went. And I was like, it isn't that. It's like, it's sort of how you started the podcast, is a positivity. And it's interesting to think about, you were saying, triathlon can be a selfish sport. And absolutely, it can be isolating and selfish and seemingly selfish or whatever. But the funny part is I played team sports my whole life. And then when I got into like the running, cycling, started dabbling in the triathlon thing, the main thing that I noticed that I thought was amazing was that how many people were doing stuff like you were saying, good job, and get up the bridge, good to see, keep it in there, just on a training run or something like that, how actually it was the most unselfish, because everyone wanted their competitors, their friends, to do good or even better than they did. And it didn't bother them for the most part, because it wasn't a selfish pursuit. It was sort of like a community pursuit where they were happy to see you do well. And that was so rare to me, because in competitive sports, there's a lot of times it's really a hard thing finding it. I think this is almost the secret to winning, is to be able to create the chemistry and the gel where other players want to see their other players do well, like really well, better than them. That's a challenge, right? Because you are on the team, you want to be the man or the woman. You want to. I think that's a natural tendency, and I think we all have that even on the triathlon course. But I think in triathlon, a lot of times, the excitement that people get from seeing other people finish a race or do well is unmatched. Like, you just don't see that in team sports. There's somebody had a bad game and they're over there sulking while they won the game, and someone else had a great game, and then they're kind of bummed out. I mean, that's just the experience that I had through the whole playing ball and stuff like that. But there's really that thing you had as something I used to have, and then I lost it. It's sort of like you would see people out there running, good job, keep it up. That was a thing. And now it sounds like you've sort of embarked on your innocence journey or something.
Getting in touch with my triathlon inner child.
Yeah, it's in a way, because I don't think that you have always been that way necessarily. Maybe that's one of the ways that you were, and then you weren't, and now you've come back
don't get me wrong. Like, I'm not Chatty Cathy when we run. You're not. No, it's funny. Like, we were running in Houston, and I was going to run with Angela Falcon and Nicole Winger, and I was like, I'm going to run with you ladies, I'll run with y'all. And I was like, are y'all chatty? Do y'all talk a lot? Because I don't talk at all when I run. I don't want to talk. But when I see somebody come in the direction, I'll wave, it's a good morning or whatever. And they're both like, no, we don't talk. I was like, perfect. And then I was laughing because Angela was like, yeah, I don't want to talk at all when we run. I'm just going to listen to your podcast. And I was like, I'm going to be right next to you. We could easily have a conversation. You're just going to listen to my words. What the heck? And but no, I'm the same way. But I like saying hi. Like, I think it.
No, I do too.
Because it's funny, because it's small things like that, and not that a good morning for me on a run is going to change anybody's life. But I think you'd be surprised, like, how crappy of a day somebody could have, and like you go by and I'm like, hey man, good job, or hey, good morning. It's like, especially given like the last 6 to 8 months, we've lost so much connection and the ability to see people's emotions with masks and things like that. You can't see people's smiles and grins, and like you have to interpret like the look in their eyes instead of like what their body language. It's just very, very hard. And I think now that people are getting out, it's like people like sometimes, like, if I'll be running by someone in the greenway and they like have their head down, I look at them the entire time. And a lot of times I'll say good morning still, because you have to wonder, like, are they just assuming no one's going to talk to them, or out there feeling alone and isolated? And sometimes it's like, hey, or if you run with somebody and think like, they're probably not going to speak your language, it's like, hey, how's it going? Like, why are you laughing at me right now? Like, I'm not,
because they're probably putting their head down because they're like, oh, here comes Chatty Cathy. Here comes Chatty.
Shit. I've now become the Riverwalk Chatty Cathy. That's not me, dude. I'm not. I just want to say good morning. Listen, I don't want to know how your day is going. I just want to say hi. Like, I just want to do it for me and keep going.
How do you feel when they don't respond? Because that's when that I have a problem with that.
So I was going to say, like, you're like you're grumpy
No
Gary.
wave or anything like that. I'm like, all right.
My big thing is the wave. Because I won't always say good morning, but I'll at least give a wave. And I usually judge the effort I put behind the good morning on their outward expression of how they're like rolling. And like some people, like, I can tell he's probably not going to say hi, but it's I'll usually always throw up a little wave, like the hand wave, like you do in the neighborhood wave. Like, hey, I don't know you, we don't speak, but I'm give you the neighborhood wave because that's what we do.
Does it get above the shoulder?
Or for sure. When I'm running, no, I make it a little low,
like a motorcycle.
Yeah, it's like drop it down to the Jeep wave over the steering wheel. Yeah, dude, I don't like the no wave back. I'm like, how hard is it to not wave back? It's a tough one to swallow. Like it's, sometimes like, what? I think I'm just going to do another couple out and backs and just wave more and see if I can like get a reaction or walk it next like, hey, and bring it up like real high. Like, I didn't want to bring it up, but I see you out there all the time and I'm a waver and you're not a waver. And like, I just want to make sure, did you see me wave? Is it, or are you just not a waiver? Just it sounds like a Seinfeld episode. Like, are you a waiver or not a waiver? I'm like, I feel like I just want to make sure you see I'm waving. It's okay if you don't want to wave, but dude, like just, wave back, like give me some.
The head nod?
The head nod. Means like, that's another thing. Like you give like the head nod and you're like, you're not going to head nod me back? Like,
that's the worst. As with a head nod, I'm giving up. I'm throwing away the wave. I'm just going to give you, the head.
The head.
And they're just
nothing?
Like, nothing?
Especially if it's eye contact. Because you know exactly what I'm doing. I'm giving you like, hey, like the right away or the thing. Like, you're not going to.
They're jogging and I'm in an interval and I'm still head nodding.
That's right.
And they're not.
For sure.
Oh, come on.
I'm waving. I'm like, this or whatever. And man, it is. It's like, fucking people. I swear.
Yeah, start it positive and end it with a grinder.
No, it's listen. I'm gonna keep being the I guess the new Riverwalk. They're like, here he comes again, C26 guy, Chetty Cathy. Keep your head down. You guys gonna go run at 7:00? No. Let's go run at 8. If we run at 7, we're probably gonna see Ramblin' Rob on his run, and he's gonna want to chat us up for a little bit.
Why am I picturing you right now with these like short running shorts and these high
the scallops and
the
Yeah, with got my fanny pack on and my Walkman and attached to my hip. I'm like, hey ladies, what's going on? Are we out to run today? No, it's definitely not the extent that I give. But you know what? Whatever, dude.
Whatever, dude.
Whatever. So listen, if you've learned anything from the podcast today, be a waver. Okay? Yeah. Be a waver and a head nodder. Don't not wave back. Don't not. It's not right. It's just not right. If there's we've been gray, but I'm going to be black and white on this. Just be a freaking waver.
I know. Yeah.
It's the simple things.
The nod. It's not that hard.
It's really not that hard. It's like a flip in the neck, like in the chin. Like just do yourself in the running society. Because on a serious note, you don't ever know if this is going to be that person's day. Like if they're like, I'm just going to quit. I'm out there running and I'm super slow and all I ran by is like, because that's the great thing too about running is that there's only one fast guy every day and one slow person on the planet. Like everyone else just kind of falls in between. So you never know if you're going to see a person who's all they're going to see, and how we visualize everyone else is always faster than we are. And you might see someone struggling doing run, like, man, like you're like, good job. Like there's this lady that lives across the street from us who the last 2 months you can tell she's trying to like get back in shape because she's getting up every morning and walking the cul-de-sac up and down for like an hour.
Ah, good.
And exactly. Like kudos to you. Like that's like a huge accomplishment. And you know what she does in the process?
What? Weights? Soup cans?
She does weights, but even better, the day she doesn't do weights, you know what she does? She puts every person's paper on their front step.
Oh, the bend over.
The bend over neighbor of the year award goes to 1726. Yeah. But no, it's just man, everyone's getting out there doing their own thing. And that's, we'll close and wrap it up. We won't go on a different, Seinfeld episode, but everyone's out there working hard just like you are. And just like we worked hard for this podcast today, we hope it brought you a smile and a laugh in a world full of non-wavers. We are the Waving Podcast. Appreciate tuning in as always. If you haven't, please head to our website, C26triathlon.com. It's our one-stop shop for all things coaching, camps, and community. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, or just want to give us your overall stance on the wave and the head nod, you can contact Mike at crushingiron@gmail.com, or you can always reach out to me directly, C26coach@gmail.com.
Right. And if you feel like it,
wave.
Leave us a little review at iTunes.
said we weren't going to do that.
That's right. You're in marketing. I'll take that off. Okay.
All right.
All right.
See ya.